Hair. I have been here for a bit, and I've watched this conference grow, and it's become really like kind of this amoebus thing that I really enjoy happening every year. And so for this first panel, I think we should do what we do best and talk about diversity. And that's another reason why I'm up here, is that there's a lot of discussion about diversity and like, is it important? Is it valuable to the space as a whole? And I think this next panel will be talking about why or why not we should be focused on light client diversity for the Ethereum ecosystem. So I'd like to introduce Margot Nykirk of there's a J in her last name, so I want you to know it's huge that I just pronounced that correctly. And she will be introducing her entire panel. So sit tight for the next 30, and it's going to be fun.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with me here today. Client diversity. Timely topic, but before we get into all the juicy stuff, I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves just briefly. Like, who are you? Though I'm sure many people already know who you are, but who are you and why are you relevant to this panel?
Hey guys, I'm Light Client. I work on the Go Ethereum team.
My name is Dan O'Farron. I'm a maintainer on the Hyperledger Besu team, one of many.
Hi, I'm Darren Langley, otherwise known as Langers, and I am a core contributor for Rocket Pool.
I'm Nixo. I'm the executive director of eStaker, and we advocate for solo stakers.
Great. Thanks. So client diversity, right? This is a topic that's sort of been in Ethereum for a while, fades into its distance, something happens, we talk about it again. Here we are again. So just to get everyone up to speed, right, there was a bug in Nethermind, took down 8% of the validators. And this reunited the conversation about what that means for Geth, right? What would have happened with Geth? So maybe let's just start basic. Like, what would that mean in terms of like Ethereum's state if that would have happened at that time? Because it was like 85% of the validators or 80% at that moment. Like, so just set the stage. What does that mean for the health of Ethereum?
Yeah, I mean, from the Geth side, there's a lot of different types of bugs that you could have in the client. You could have something that just crashes the client, causes it to go offline. That's probably the most, the preferred error that would be to happen to a majority client, because the network stops finalizing for a bit. We can go and try to understand why did the client crash, and then roll out a fix. Everybody can update, and then we start finalizing the chain again. Whereas if we have something that causes us to write something invalid into the state, produce a block with a header that is not accepted by the rest of the chain, then Geth, as a supermajority client, would cause the beacon chain to fork onto another chain. So you'd have the bugged fork and the canonical fork, the fork that follows the actual specification of Ethereum. And how to resolve this fork, there's not really a clear question. Basically, what we would say is that the canonical fork of Ethereum is the fork the minority clients are running, because there was a bug in the majority client. It didn't follow the specification of Ethereum, and that minority fork is the true Ethereum chain. And eventually all of the nodes that were running Geth on the minority fork would have this inactivity leak, or they would have some sort of slashing event if they try to come back to the other chain, and they would be removed from the validator set, and then the minority chain would, after 1, 2, 3 weeks, would start finalizing again.
And I kind of want to emphasize that the huge deal about that part is that you can do like a sort of social recovery of the chain, but it's going to leave a lot of people unhappy, and it's going to intensely hurt the credibility of Ethereum in that. No matter what the outcome is, the credibility of Ethereum is shaken at that point.
And the social upheaval,
Yeah.
as you said.
I want to get into that a little bit later, but for now, you bring up some great points, and we'll get there in a second. But I want to, we're talking about Nethermind, we're talking about Geth. There's a bunch of other minority clients too, right? So maybe, Dano, you can talk a little bit about the different generations, like you like to call it, in terms of the execution clients, the pros and cons sort of each. Like, why would someone try, run a Geth or run Aragon or whatever? And with that in mind as well, like if you are one of these people that believes that running a majority client is just like more competitive, more performative. Like, what do you need to do to sort of convince them to change that mindset? I don't know if mindset is the right word, but that perspective at least.
Right. So on the notion of generations, right now there are 5 execution clients that can actually finalize on the post-merge chain, but there's been a lot more than 5 Ethereum clients in history. There used to be a C++ client, there used to be a Python client, there used to be another Java client. And these were clients that existed. I consider that, along with Geth, to be the first generation of Ethereum clients. Those were the clients that were there for the challenges of the DAO and for the Shanghai attacks. And after that, you started getting a second generation of client. Now I put Nethermind and Besu in there. And I think a lot of those second generation clients, they do more than just mainnet validation. Nethermind's a StarkNet client, and Besu was focused on enterprise Ethereum, and they've recently moved on to being the client that is behind the Linea ZK chain.
Right.
And I think post-merge, we're starting to see a third generation of clients show up. I think I would put Aragon in the second generation. And so the last client would be Reth.
Right.
And I would put that in the third generation, clients that showed up after the merge. So the biggest advantage that Geth has, in addition to being the most stable, is they're also the most battle tested. They've been around since the beginning of Ethereum. They're the only client out there that can claim that credibility. So there's a lot of credit that they have in having run it for so long. They weren't always, they had issues at times, but they've resolved most of them. Like during the Shanghai attacks, Parity basically kept the network going, and that was an example of where client diversity saved Ethereum. So while Geth was fixing their bugs, Parity kept the chain moving along, and then Geth, they kept fixing these bugs. So that's, I think, what really got into the mind of a lot of the core developers of the value of diversity is that we can recover from these failures. Whereas if we're a single chain, we're going to be down for hours resetting validators, like every time Solana needs to go down. We'll see if Firedancer fixes that. But that's one of the big advantages. And the issue that some of these clients have is proving that they have the same battle metal that Geth has. So like when Coinbase looks at adding a new client, they've been running Geth since they've been running Ethereum. They know how to make it work. They know how to duplicate it, how to sync it fast. So when they come in with a new client, they have no idea what they're getting into and what the issues are. So they need to spend engineering time figuring out how to make it sync, how to recover it, what the failure states are, how to make it work, how to get the reporting out of it. So there's a lot of uptick to bringing in a new client with that. So unless there's something above and beyond Geth, a lot of them it doesn't make economic sense for them to change. Well, this whole issue with the potential slashing that comes with it over 2/3, changes some of that equation and makes it more viable. So that's kind of about with the different clients of how they're trying to fit in and why it's still an issue today.
From the developer's perspective, like, what are you guys doing to help run other minority clients, like in the protocol, on the protocol level?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about trying to move Ethereum to a stateless model, which I think addresses many of the biggest problems that home stakers have and that institutions have with running these really behemoth clients that are taking up 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes of disk space and causing a lot of I/O thrashing that you have to deal with and think about how to manage from an infrastructure perspective. So if we can move Ethereum to a place where you run a very lightweight client, you get a proof over the network, you verify that proof, and then you run the execution of the client, I think it removes a lot of the complexities of being a DevOps person maintaining a node farm. So trying to figure out how to do stateless Ethereum, that's one big thing. Another thing I think that we can do before we even get stateless Ethereum in the protocol is, and we've talked about this in the past at other core dev events, is trying to just get stateless Ethereum working locally within your own node. Mm-hmm. And so if you can have one node that's validating the block and able to pull out all of the data that was executed in the EVM, we have tooling to then give that as kind of a stateless block to every other client and have them run it and make sure they get the exact same value. So having a way of multiplexing the execution of a block across many clients can give you confidence that I ran this primarily with Geth, got the proof back, then I fed it to Besu and Nethermind, they executed it statelessly, they got the exact same route. that gives me very high confidence that block is going to be accepted. So I think that those are like, at the protocol level, and then something that we could be doing more at clients that could really improve how, people are able to still run Geth or run like their client of choice, but have these like easy backups to avoid finalizing some issue in a majority client.
So you brought up Coinbase about them looking to diversify their execution clients, and they just came out yesterday saying that they are going to add Nethermind and Aragon to their client side. And so I wanted to ask first to Darren from the Rocket Pool perspective, and I would love for all of you also just to have your takes afterwards. But I guess, is Rocket Pool also sort of looking into the similar methods of diversifying? And I also saw when, Nixo, you had commented on that on Twitter, or on X, I should say. Slip, oops. So I commented, I saw that you commented on X that, in terms of the numbers, like what does this mean for the overall health of Ethereum? And so I would like to hear from all you guys, like where you see this going in terms of node operators, like looking to diversify their execution clients. But yeah, let's start with with Dan.
So from a Rocket Pool perspective, we're a decentralized protocol. So the team itself and the DAO itself operate a smart contract protocol. All of the node operation is actually done by a permissionless network of node operators. We've got about 3,500 node operators in about 137 different geographic locations. So they're kind of all over the place, and we don't actually control them. So we can't say you must not run Geth, or you must run Geth, or anything. They run the client that they want to run. In saying that, the community are very, very active. They're very Ethereum aligned. They care about staking and they care about Ethereum. So they essentially kind of self-organize and they're self kind of enforcing. So they will actually help other node operators, first of all, explain why they shouldn't necessarily run a supermajority client. There's transparency. They have transparency tools in showing us what our situation is. In other words, what is the percentage of our network that are running Geth? They educate people on how to do it. And then they've also built tooling around swapping. So within Rocket Pool, there's this thing called the rescue node, which actually is open to solo stakers as well now. And what it does is, the problem with the execution layer swap is that you need to resync. With a consensus layer, it was a lot easier. But with the execution layer, you have to resync the client.
Sure.
So with this rescue node, essentially you point your validator at this rescue node. You can validate and continue on without losing your attestations and to validate. But your node can then resync in the background. Once that's resynced, then you can swap it back.
But I just want to, sorry, I don't mean to hone in, but and then we'll get to Nixo, but you mentioned that, so the community is sort of in charge of this effort, right? So what are those ongoing efforts? Because it does seem like it's widespread now amongst these different, decentralized or centralized exchanges like a Coinbase, or decentralized like Rocket Pool, so what, I think specifically, like what are those efforts that are happening right now?
Yeah, those three things. There's like transparency on where are we as a protocol.
Sure.
So like currently we run about 30% Geth. Besu is very, very popular. And Nethermind as well. So we're quite nicely split at the moment.
Okay.
But it's the transparency, education and support around helping our node operators to swap, and then tooling around making it super simple to swap. Because if, as a decentralized protocol, if any of those things weren't in place, people wouldn't swap. You need to have transparency, you have to have all of that education and support to get them there.
Yeah. So Nixo, with that, I saw online that you had sort of done the math in terms of what this means if Coinbase, or when Coinbase diversifies its execution clients. What does that mean, like overall, for like the health of Ethereum in terms of this, like the path towards this diversity?
So right now, the best estimates that we have are from two different data sets, and one data set is a node crawler, and that doesn't actually give us what we care about, which is validator client diversity. So it gives us good node client diversity, but it could, for example, connect to a node and ask it what client it's running, and that node could be running 600 validators, and it doesn't know that. So it weights them equally with a node that's running just one validator. The other data set that we have is just survey results. So it's somebody who works at Beacon Chain named Sonic who called up a bunch of operators and said, what are you running? And he assumes that everybody is telling the truth because right now there's not really any perverse incentive to lie. And so then that is sort of extrapolated to the rest of the network. And so that got us, extrapolating that survey data to the rest of the network got us to like 85% geth. And we saw the best indicator that we saw that was accurate data was during the bugs earlier this year. When Besu went offline, the number of nodes that went offline pretty closely matched what we thought Besu represented in the network. And then when Nethermind went offline, it also represented. And those are the two clients that follow geth most closely. So we had a pretty good idea that 85% was accurate. With Coinbase running 15% of the validator set, them switching over to 50% Nethermind means that that's already by itself a 7.5% drop. Kiln also just switched to 50% Nethermind, so that, and they run like 5% of the network. So that's another 2.5%. So just in the last week, we have, well, when Coinbase switches, between Kiln and Coinbase, that is a 10% drop in geth, which from, I think we had actually gotten down to like 75 or 80. So we...
It's like we're being
I can't
interrupted
focus
for
either.
a,
I can't focus
we're
either.
being interrupted for a commercial right now.
We might actually be below the 66% threshold with that change. We are not entirely sure because so much of the network isn't reporting, and if you work for or run professional node operators, please self-report. Contact Sonic and self-report. It really helps because there's no way to really get more accurate data at this moment.
You probably saw this, but there's actually a proposal in the Engine API that was recently accepted to share the information from the execution client to the consensus client, and the consensus client will put in its graffiti by default which execution client's running.
Isn't the concern about that, though, that it's really easily spoofable?
It's easy to spoof, certainly.
But like most validators wouldn't.
You would think so. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know. We'll have to kind of see how it goes. The thing is, you could also spoof a lot of the other signals about what client you're running. I think the most accurate thing is attestation packing. That's like the most clear fingerprint about what consensus client you're running. All of the other, Ether node things that we've used to see what is the network distribution of execution clients has always just used what's in the status of the peer-to-peer exchange. And it's easy to change that if you want to. Every fork of geth, first thing they do, rip grep through the whole thing, change the name of the client so it says something different over peer-to-peer.
I do like that though, because that's basically opting into survey data, or like it's setting an opt-out for survey data. So even if it's easily spoofable, when somebody asks you what client you're running and they just believe you, that's far more spoofable than having to manually change something in your client.
And if people are just removing it from their graffiti, like big operators, you can just kind of say why. What are you afraid of?
Yeah.
What are you hiding from the people?
To be fair, like Rocket Pool uses the graffiti to track our node operators, track what clients they're using. We have like a special kind of like encoding to do that. Most people use it. It's built by default in. So. Yeah.
Anybody want to go to the Zen Zone?
Yeah, I really want to go to the Zen Zone now.
I'm really getting sold on this, honestly.
The issue with the graffiti is it's also delayed because you have to wait for a proposal to actually
That's
see
true.
it.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
there is a bit of a delay in that, but you can kind of get the best gist
Yeah.
without being too privacy. Well, by keeping a bit of privacy.
So I also wanted to ask, let's say there is a bug in geth, right? Does the supermajority get bailed out? Like what happens, Like what would happen if
So it depends on how much of it is a get at the time it fails and how much it tests. There's two magic numbers to worry about, 2/3 and 1/3. If a client under 1/3 fails, the chain will finalize and it'll go on just fine without that client. But if 2/3 attest to improperly produced block, that's when the slashing comes in and where the concerns about leaking over the next couple of weeks does. So just getting Geth below the 2/3 line already solves the biggest existential money threat that people might face for attesting to a bad block. But that's if Geth produces a bad block. And remember, a lot of the blocks are being produced by block producers now, not necessarily the client mining. So another type of bug you might run into is a block that Geth rejects that is otherwise valid. And that'll resolve itself, within a couple of blocks. They'll just fork it, do another block, and that poor proposer loses their money. So that, if there's a bug invalidating a block that was otherwise valid, then the impact there is actually quite minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 2/3 thing, as Lightcline said, was you create two forks, and in there are essentially two universes, and in both universe, if you have to choose between those two universes, and in both cases, people are going to lose money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you have a real issue. That's where the social upheaval comes from, because you're essentially creating two separate chains at that point.
Right, but the consensus spec says that you're only supposed to go on the correctly validated chain, which is where the social, which is going to be the chain side where people lose the most money. Yeah. And that's where the social battle comes in, where they say, hey, we're going to lose a lot of money. Can we go back in time and change the rules so we don't lose billions of dollars? Yeah. And that's where the real drama would happen.
Mm-hmm. It's also part of the reason why Coinbase switching was such a big deal, is because there was a very small cohort of people who was saying, like, I know it's important not to be on Geth, but the big moneyed parties in the industry are on Geth, and so if they end up on a part of the chain that is not considered canonical, I know that I'll have an advocate to advocate for my validator being on the right chain or being recovered. And so Coinbase, and like I don't think that actually has merit, because Coinbase is very aligned, and I don't think they would advocate for anything that like destroyed the credibility.
Although Circle is wherever Circle says the canonical chain is, that's probably.
That's true. That would be. So the Coinbase switching over does have like implications beyond just the percentages.
Mm-hmm. But Geth, obviously, we're talking about Geth here a lot, and because it's had the most developed, right? It has the most resources. The Ethereum Foundation has sort of contributed to it, or has contributed to it, not sort of. But I'm wondering too, like, what is it specific? Like, why are users sticking with Geth? Is it because because it has the most resources, or is it because like it's just sort of, oh, everyone's sort of doing it. I'm joining this. I'm gonna immediately just go into the most competitive one, I guess. I don't know what
because they already set up their validators and they work.
Sure.
And it takes an engineering effort to figure out how to safely switch over, especially if you're running millions of dollars. You don't want downtime. You don't want anybody being angry at you. And so like you're going to stick with what you know works. And you really should have a backup plan regardless, especially in a time where there's not an emergency happening. And so there should be engineering resources really dedicated to setting up fallbacks and knowing how to switch your primary execution client if necessary.
Mm-hmm. How is the Geth team going about all this conversation around this? I mean, I understand that like people like you have like triumphed this issue for a long time, but for the wider crypto Ethereum ecosystem and crypto ecosystem, this is sort of back in the news, right? So how do you go about this when your Geth is sort of the super majority here, but at the same time, the ethos around all this is to sort of make it more equitable?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit like we talked about at the very beginning of the panel, we're trying to think about how can we make it easier to run other clients, and how can we make it so that people can integrate other clients into their workflow, even if they continue to run Geth. I think being able to multiplex different clients together, that way you have higher confidence that the network is going to accept a block, is one of the most important things. But I mean, I have to say in general, like it's not something that we're working like day in, day out to get people to stop using our software.
Sure.
We're building our software, we're trying to make a good client. And I think that other clients are going to surpass us. Like Geth supermajority is not something that's going to be the case in 3 years. I'm almost certain of that. And we just have to continue playing our role in this ecosystem as being a robust client and helping to try and lead the protocol forward, and other people are going to continue stepping up. I think the best that we can do is just be on a panel like this and tell people that you're probably not going to get bailed out if the chain happens to fork, and so you should really consider running another client.
Right, and so, but what are those magic numbers then around like running the other client, like in terms of
I mean, you have to have under
diversifying
66% Geth.
Okay.
As long as the chain doesn't finalize an invalid block, a block that, Geth is accepting and the rest of the network isn't, then...
Right, but in terms of like the share of I'm thinking more of what we were talking about, the second generation of clients, like where do we want to see those numbers like creep up to for like another mine, a Besu or an Aragon? Is there like a specific number we have in mind, or is this just only focused on getting it under the 66%?
I mean, it's really as long as you get it under the 66% mark. If the other 34% is Besu, then that's... I mean, we do want to have a lot of clients. We do want to have like a good dispersion. I think that is the best thing for the ecosystem in general. That means that every client is like punching at its weight, and everybody is like also in agreement that all these clients are doing the things that you expect. And so that's where we want to go. But reducing Geth below 66% is like, that's the number one thing. That should be the most important thing that we're doing right now as a community.
In an ideal world with 5 clients, it would be 20% each. But it also doesn't matter if it's 20%, 25%, 30%, as long as no client is above 66.
Okay.
I mean, the benefit of having that 20% split is that it's kind of like liveliness. If one has a bug where it crashes, it means that only that portion of the network is affected, or that portion of the blocks that are being produced is affected. If it's a higher percentage, then there is a little bit more that are being affected in terms of that. A few missed blocks and all that sort of thing. But generally, if we've got we've got a good distribution anyway. So the next block will come along, the next slot will be filled, and all of that sort of thing. Ethereum is designed to be live, and so it kind of works like that. But you might get some missed slots and missed blocks if we don't have that split.
So one piece of the puzzle, if we were having this discussion last year, the numbers would be 25, because there was only 4 clients last year. And now Reth's coming along, and I think as far as balancing out and unfortunately taking market share, it's a zero-sum game. Reth's gain is someone else's loss. But I think Reth is really in position to really even things out a lot, to bring it more in line into the safe zone of less than 66% of the majority client.
How effective do you think things are this time around in terms of that pressure of client diversity? Because I think, personally, I feel like this is, and especially in Ethereum, there's all these conversations, like problems that the developers are working to solve. And if it's not one thing, it's another. And then it sort of becomes like a distant memory. And we've been here before with this client diversity issue. So how effective is it this time, do you think?
I think that there's a lot of push and pull, because when we did the last social layer push for client diversity, it was for the consensus layer client, and like the percentage of solo stakers on the network, I think, was a lot higher. But as more money comes in, more of that money is going to large staking operators, which on one hand means that they're running a lot more money and they should be a lot more concerned. But on the other hand, it means they're running a lot more money and they are nervous about switching. So there's a lot of push and pull in both directions.
Anyone else have a take? No? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, risk management. These large companies, they should be doing risk management a little bit better. Swapping isn't that difficult necessarily, but I understand that there's a large engineering effort to do it. But yeah, there is huge risk in this particular instance.
Sure. So, we're talking here about how effective this is this time around, but when do we think this diversity problem is going to be solved? Let's say, you just mentioned that you don't think that Geth will be the supermajority client at some point, or I don't know what the time frame is for that, but that another client might overtake its share. Where are we heading in terms of specifically when this will be solved, or when this is not a non-issue for Ethereum, or will this ever be a non-issue for Ethereum?
I think the next big shakeup in client diversity is going to happen when we ship vertical proofs. whether we ship it with vertical trees or not, because that's going to have an entirely different nature of client that you can run with it. You don't need the terabytes of disk space. In theory, you could, validate it on your smartwatch. I mean, that's the joke going around. But the smartwatches are powerful enough, and the clients are so small and useful that that's what could literally happen. So when the impact of these vertical clients, there's going to be a big, huge incentive to reduce the amount of software and storage space you're going to need. And I think that's really what's going to drive, when it's really going to be solved, I think that's going to be the big external pressure that's going to solve it. I think until then, there'll be minor incremental changes to bring us, into the safety zone. And I don't think it'll be that, I'm not terribly concerned about it. I'm not moving, where I have my stuff staked. I have it across multiple clients. And I'm not, as it is today, I'm willing to take the risk. I don't think, I think there is, a risk, but I don't think it's existential to what my investments are.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I mean, so our node operators have always been quite early adopters in the space. So they took on these kind of newer clients very, very quickly. But these clients are now very mature. And so each of the execution clients are very mature and great clients.
Great. Well, our time is up. But thank you, panelists, for being here today. It was a really fruitful conversation. And thank you to the audience. And enjoy the rest of your time here.
Thank you.
All right. All right, let's just do another round of applause. No one ever died from getting another round of applause. Thank you, Margot, and the client community. Anybody have their opinions changed about anything in this last 30 minutes? Let's get to pro-diversity, hands in the air. Got some, yeah, okay. Anti-diversity, hands in the air. Taking a photo of you now. So thank you, all of you. This is really filled out. You guys are very interested in this stuff. The next session we'll have is actually a topic that I'm sure all of you have messed around with, but it's layer 2s and layer 2 solutions. Basically, how do they scale efficiently on top of the blockchains that they're built on, and the various implementations. And I don't know what they're going to talk about, the folks from Metastyle, but I mean, I work with this stuff all the time, and there's a lot more to, I think, the future of layer 2s and rollups and their capacity to bring change to regions all over the world than we are currently giving credit to. And this is to say there are regions where like layer 2 solutions with community currencies backed by like USDC or Bitcoin on the layer 1 could be a very, very viable solution for some communities who experience banking interruptions, internet interruptions, all sorts of things. So when it comes to, right now we see layer 2s as a solution for just getting more transactions on chain, specifically on Ethereum right now. And in the future, I think it might be a way of looking at it as this is now a way for us to get a complete humanity picture of our transactions happening on Ethereum. And I think that that's something that's worth looking into. Anybody here working on a layer 2? Anyone? One guy? One guy? 3 guys? Any women? Any they thems? One. And so I'm sure that some of you who are here already know a lot about this stuff. We're just going to get some more chairs set up for them. But I'd be curious if anybody who is going to be, in the Q&A after this, get your questions ready now. Because I feel as though I watch a lot of layer 2 conversations just go in circles. And I never see people coming forward and being like, hey, what about this? What about what they're doing over here? And that would be cool. Another thing I'd like to bring up for everyone, because I'm supposed to plug this, there's hashtags and various things you're supposed to be doing, like going to parties and getting swag. I would remember that information if I was better about this, but I'm not. So I'm sure at some point there's going to be a voice that interrupts the panel that you're watching and says a bunch of the stuff that I'm supposed to be saying right now. Okay, without further ado, it does appear like we're almost there. I'm just going to reintroduce myself because I feel like it. My name is Jarrell